My wife, Lisa, couldn't have a baby, no matter how much we tried. So we decided to try IVF, where they make a baby in a lab. What I didn't expect was that before the baby was even made, I caught Lisa switching my sample with the sample from her first love, Ken. Later, just when she thought she was pregnant with a child that was hers and Ken's, when the child grew up and it was time for him to learn about his family, I laughed. Because I had already switched my sample back. And I had also switched Lisa's egg with one from my ex-girlfriend, Amy. I came home with my son, Alex, after a medical project overseas, and I was shocked. A whole bunch of people, relatives I hardly ever saw, were all gathered together. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were having a big family party. The person who stood out the most was Ken, sitting in the middle of the couch with red eyes. Lisa, my wife, who loves to party and go to clubs, was sitting next to him, holding him close and comforting him softly. I raised an eyebrow, put my suitcase down, and asked Lisa, "What's going on today? Why is everyone here?" Alex, standing behind me, crossed his arms and looked at Ken with a cold look. He already had an idea of who this man was. My mother-in-law sat in the main seat, looking upset and like she didn't know what to say. Before Lisa could answer, Ken, with tears in his eyes, walked up to Alex and said excitedly, "My dear son, I'm your real father." Alex quickly stepped back, looking disgusted, his eyebrows furrowed as though Ken was something dirty. He took a step back, his voice cold as ice. "My father is Robert. This kid is really my loyal little buddy." I took Alex's hand, giving him a look that said, "It's okay." Then I raised my fist and punched Ken in the face. The sound of the punch echoed through the living room. I spoke with a cold tone, my eyes sharp as knives. "Don't go around claiming to be family." Lisa suddenly stood up, quickly helping Ken to his feet, and yelled at me, "Robert, are you crazy? How dare you hit Ken?" She raised her hand to hit me. Alex, quick as lightning, stepped forward and slapped Lisa. He gritted his teeth and said, "You dare hit my dad?" Alex's voice wasn't loud, but it had a clear power to it. Lisa froze, furious and angry, and raised her hand again to hit Alex. But Ken grabbed her, pretending to advise her, "Lisa, don't hit him, that's our son." His fatherly act made me want to throw up. Lisa lowered her hand, glaring at Alex with hate, and said, "If it weren't for the fact that you're your real father's son, I'd teach you a lesson today." Alex sneered. "I'd like to see what you can do to teach me." His sharp gaze was like me when I was younger. I felt proud in my heart. Truly, he is my well-raised son. An older relative cleared his throat, trying to calm things down. "Quiet down." His deep voice had a clear authority. Everyone gradually quieted down, their eyes all focused on the older relative. He turned to Lisa and asked, "Lisa, you called everyone here. What is this all about?" Lisa took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. She reached out and held Ken's arm, looking very loving. She said, "Actually, today, I have something important to announce." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, finally resting on me and Alex. I quietly watched her, waiting to see what she would do. She said Alex is not Robert's biological son. Lisa's voice was not loud, but it was like a bomb going off in the living room. Alex quickly turned to look at me, shock in his eyes. I gestured for him to stay calm. The relatives around us began whispering, like sharks that had smelled blood, excitedly stirring. She continued, "When we did IVF back then." Lisa hesitated, as if it were hard to say. "The doctor said Robert's quality wasn't good. To spare his feelings as a would-be father, I used Ken's sample instead." This idiot sneaking around and now trying to turn things around and blame me? Lisa's evil gaze turned to me, as if waiting for me to get really angry. But I remained calm and composed. So she had no choice but to continue her act. She said, "Today, I called everyone here because I want everyone to witness." She looked deeply at Ken and continued, "Alex recognizing his real father. The relatives immediately started talking. One of them said, "Since Alex isn't Robert's son, he has to recognize his biological father." Exactly. After being the Liu family's son-in-law all these years, it's time for him to step down. Robert has been controlling the Liu family's business all these years, and now that the truth is out, it's time for him to step down from the Liu group. Hearing this, I couldn't help but smirk. These relatives, who had been pushed out of the company's management by me in recent years, could only get money from the year-end profits. They had problems with me. Now they were enjoying the drama, hoping to see Lisa and me fall apart, so they could come back and share the company's profits. Alex looked at the greedy relatives around us, his grip on my hand tightening. I spoke up. "Alex will always be my child." My voice was not loud, but it was firm and strong. Ken, looking helpless, sighed. "Robert, how long are you going to lie to yourself?" I wasn't lying to myself. Alex is indeed my son. Did Lisa and Ken really think they could fool me? Back then, when Lisa couldn't get pregnant, we decided to do IVF. Before the embryos were made, I accidentally caught Lisa and a nurse secretly messing with my sample storage, and I overheard her happily calling Ken, saying she had switched my sample with his. At that time, I didn't make a sound. I silently turned around and gave the doctor $1 million to use the extra sample I had stored earlier to switch it back. I even kindly asked the doctor to replace Lisa's egg with my ex-girlfriend's. On the day of embryo formation, I witnessed the miracle with Lisa. She was overly happy, probably thinking that child was hers and Ken's. I looked at her silly face and nearly laughed out loud. All these years, I've watched her act like a clown, pretending to be kind to Alex. I couldn't have been happier. She thought she could trap me, but she didn't realize that she'd been playing the role of a mother for over 20 years. Lisa interrupted my thoughts, mocking me. "Stubborn as a mule, although Alex has been with you all these years, his sample isn't yours. His real father is Ken." I spoke calmly, but with a hint of teasing. "Are you dreaming in the middle of the day?" Lisa snorted and said, "If you don't believe me, let's do a DNA test. I'm also divorcing you. You used me, forcing me into marriage. I've been with you for 25 years. I've been more than patient with you." When she suggested divorce, a smile of joy appeared on her face. Seems like she's been thinking about this for a long time, and she dares to say she's been patient with me? She moved into the Liu family for 25 years, but refused to sleep with me for 25 years. While I was raising our child, she was off having fun with Ken. While I was fighting in the business world, holding up the Liu family's name, she was clubbing and hanging out with rich kids. But she did make one mistake. This wasn't because I loved her, and that's why I was her good guy. I married her just to get the Liu family's son-in-law status and take control of Liu Group. Now, Liu Group is entirely under my control. So Lisa no longer has any value to me. I said, "Divorce is fine." I shrugged. "But there's no need for a DNA test. I'm certain Alex is my son." Alex looked at me, his eyes filled with belief. "Dad, I trust you." Lisa and Ken were both panicked. She said, "Alex, don't you believe your mother?" Alex ignored her, staying close to me. At that moment, a young college student-looking boy barged in. He walked straight up to Alex, excitedly calling, "Brother!" Everyone in the room froze. Not only did a father pop up out of nowhere, now there's a younger brother? I looked at the boy who resembled Ken, and a vague suspicion began to form in my mind. This must be Lisa and Ken's illegitimate child. They'd kept it well hidden. Lisa often didn't come home, and it's no wonder I never noticed she was pregnant. It seems this drama is even more elaborate than I imagined. My mother-in-law sat at the head of the table and asked the boy, "Lisa, what is going on here?" The atmosphere in the living room froze once again. The boy looked like he was on the verge of tears, his eyes red. He said, "Brother, my name is Daniel. I've always known about you." His voice was a bit shaky and soft, with a slight tremor. He sneaked a glance at me and quickly lowered his head, as if afraid I might scold him. He continued, "My dad often talks about you. He says you're very outstanding, very handsome." Ken, seizing the moment, put on an expression of deep sorrow. He said, "Alex, my dear son, I've missed you so much over the years." He raised his head, his face full of age and hardship, as though he had suffered a great injustice. He added, "Daniel has missed you too. We often secretly came to see you." Daniel quickly nodded, eagerly adding, "Really, brother, I go to your school, just so I could be closer to you." He pulled a stack of photos from his pocket and carefully handed them to Alex. He said, "These are pictures of you. I secretly took them." Alex took the stack of photos and flipped through them. There were photos of him in his graduation gown, smiling brightly, photos of him looking tired after basketball practice, and photos of him debating with classmates, his eyes sparkling. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. All these years, there had been a creepy man lurking around, watching him, taking photos of him. Lisa wasn't idle either. She walked up to my mother-in-law and, pointing at Daniel, said in a heavy tone, "Mom, this is your grandson. Today everyone is here to witness it, so accept him." Lisa was no fool. She knew that after my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law was the one who had the most say in the Liu family. She invited all the relatives here, but her real purpose was to pressure my mother-in-law into acknowledging this child. She was confident that if my mother-in-law agreed to let Daniel recognize his ancestry, I would have no objections. After all, over the past 25 years, she had witnessed my obedience and filial respect toward my mother-in-law. Daniel, being quick-witted, immediately turned to my mother-in-law, respectfully calling, "Grandmother." My mother-in-law looked at Daniel, then glanced at me, her gaze complex. She didn't immediately respond to Daniel's greeting. I knew she felt sorry for me. Not wanting to put my mother-in-law in a difficult position, I spoke up to break the silence. "Lisa, making this illegitimate child claim his Liu family heritage and inherit the family fortune is your real goal, isn't it? Why drag Alex into it?" I turned to Alex, exchanging a look. I said, "Even if Alex isn't my biological son, he is still the only child under my name, Robert. All my assets, properties, stocks, funds, including 20% of Liu Group's shares, will all be left to him. Alex, if that's the case, would you rather stay with me, or go with your mother and this supposed real father?" My son's quick mind spun, his eyes flashing. He immediately understood what I was implying. He instantly threw himself into my arms, rubbing his cheek against my arm, and cheerfully said, "Mom has a younger brother now, and she won't leave me any inheritance. Of course, I'll stay with Dad." "What a good boy. As expected, he's my student." He skillfully turned the tables with reverse psychology. When Ken heard that I was willing to leave all my wealth to Alex, his eyes lit up, brighter than a 1,000-watt light bulb. He knew I had substantial assets. Just my jewelry, real estate, and precious metals alone were worth a pretty penny, not to mention the 20% of Liu Group shares, which were essentially a gold mine. Greed, naked greed, showed plainly on his face. He leaned toward Lisa's ear, whispering. He said, "When the old man passed away, to balance things, he divided his 60% share of the group into 4 parts. 20% to Robert, 20% to the old lady, 10% to Alex, and you only got 10%. If Robert transfers his shares to Alex, and we manage to get Alex's shares into our hands, you'll have 40%. The urgent task now is to get Robert to give up his shares and assets, let him leave with nothing, and bring Alex over to our side." Lisa thought for a moment, and Ken's plan made sense to her. She stood up, and with a motherly expression said to Alex, "Alex, your younger brother can stand on his own. He won't compete with you for inheritance, and I'm willing to give you everything." She paused, then added a condition. "The premise is that you go with Ken for a DNA test. If the test shows that you're indeed his biological son, then you have to acknowledge him as your father and treat him well. Alex sneaked a glance at me, and I subtly nodded. Fine, Alex agreed immediately, but he shrewdly added, however, before we do the DNA test, both Mom and Dad have to first go to the notary with me and transfer all the assets to my name for free. I silently applauded. This kid is sharp. What you hold in your hands is what's real. Don't trust verbal promises. At this moment, those nosy relatives who loved to stir up trouble were all worked up. What Ken had thought of, they naturally also thought of. One by one, they were rubbing their hands together, as if they could already see mountains of gold and silver calling out to them. Lisa didn't understand business. If Lou Group ended up under her name, it would be no different from them controlling it. One relative took the lead and applauded. Good, good, good. This is the way to do it. Another relative pulled out their phone and, while dialing, said, I'll contact the notary office right now. A crowd of them was buzzing around, as if they were preparing for some grand celebration. My mother-in-law, watching their busy activities, was worried and tried to stop me. Good child, maybe you should reconsider the transfer of assets. I smiled and shook my head, reassuring her. Don't worry, Mom. I know what I'm doing. My mother-in-law had always been aware of my capabilities. Seeing me so calm, she stopped pressing me. With their help, I transferred all the assets under both Lisa and my name, except for each of us having a living allowance of $50,000, to Alex's name. At the notary office, Lisa and Ken watched Alex with affection, as if they were already envisioning the day when Alex would lead Liu Group and command the winds and rains, smiling happily. I watched them daydreaming, and then looked at my son, who had just become a billionaire. I smiled too. But it wasn't enough for Lisa to bleed money. I was going to skin Ken alive. I said, Ken, didn't you say you loved Alex? Aren't you going to show it? I casually spoke, my gaze sweeping over Ken's hypocritical face. I said, I've been raising your son for over 20 years. It's cost me millions. I don't even need compensation from you. Just give the money to Alex. After all, he's the one I love the most. Alex, taking advantage of the situation, chimed in. Mr. Ito, you've been with my mom for over 20 years, so there's probably millions, right? Now that we're at the notary, don't you want to prove your loyalty to me? Otherwise, I might start doubting that you're not really here for me, but just for the Liu family behind me. Ken froze, trapped in a dilemma. If he gave the money, it would hurt. If he didn't, Alex would doubt his motives for claiming paternity. Unable to decide, Ken gritted his teeth and pulled out a card from his bag, handing it to Alex. Alex, of course, I love you. This is $5 million money I've saved up for over 10 years. Alex grabbed the bank card without hesitation and immediately called over the notary to proceed with the certification. Ken stood by, smiling, though his smile was twisted, as though he was being forced to part with his flesh. The DNA test institution was chosen by Lisa. Fearing that I might tamper with the results, she picked the most authoritative, national-level forensic testing facility. I sneered. How clever of her. After the staff collected blood samples from me, Ken, and Alex, I insisted they also collect Lisa's blood for the test. Lisa looked at me in disbelief. Robert, are you crazy? Alex is undoubtedly my child. I grinned maliciously. Since we're here, we might as well do it all at once. Though Alex didn't understand why I insisted on this, he knew I must have my reasons. So he threw a tantrum and insisted that Lisa also undergo the DNA test. Now, Lisa treated Alex like a king, so she reluctantly agreed to his request. When we left the testing center, Ken's son, Daniel, came late, holding a bouquet of flowers. Brother, he called out warmly to Alex, handing him the flowers and pretending to want to hug him. Alex's face twisted with disgust, and he shoved Daniel away. Don't touch me, you're gross. That kid was even taller than Alex, looking all smug and slick. Ken immediately tried to smooth things over. "Alex, this is your brother. We should love and support each other as a family." Alex rolled his eyes. "The test results aren't out yet, so don't go around calling him a relative just yet." I casually said, "I won't disturb your family bonding. Lisa, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and get the divorce certificate." Since there were no assets to divide, and no child custody issues to negotiate, Lisa and I didn't even need a divorce agreement. We went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau and got our divorce certificate. Ken's eyes widened, his joy obvious. He hadn't expected the divorce to happen so quickly. He thought I would keep clinging to the marriage. But Alex stayed close to me, and seeing our close relationship, Ken's jealousy flared up. After Alex went to the parking lot to fetch the car, Ken finally seized the opportunity and sarcastically mocked me. "Robert, Lisa never loved you. She's been with me all this time." Lisa, holding Ken's arm, smiled smugly. "Once the DNA test results come out, Alex will naturally come back to us." Daniel, no longer pretending to be the innocent little brother in front of Alex, arrogantly sneered, "Now all the money is brothers. Once the test results come out, you will be out on the streets begging." I couldn't be bothered to respond to their stupid provocations. Seeing that I didn't react, Lisa, thinking victory was within her grasp, revealed her true intentions. "You've controlled Liu Group for so many years. Now it's time for me and Ken to take charge." I sneered. "So you've been using Alex to take over Liu Group all along?" Lisa snorted coldly. "So what? Now that all the assets have been transferred to Alex, once the DNA test is done, I will be the real owner of Liu Group." I looked at her coldly. "I'll be waiting to see if you're truly lucky enough to take control of Liu Group." They thought their little schemes were bound to succeed, as if they already had victory in hand. But what they didn't know was that from the very beginning, they had no chance of winning. When I was handing over work at the company, Daniel appeared and kicked the general manager out, swaggering over to sit in the leather chair, crossing his legs, and claiming that his brother, the chairman, had made him the general manager. The crowd didn't dare stop him, but I was more than willing to teach him a lesson. I said, "Throw him out!" Several security guards immediately moved in to escort Daniel out. He jumped up, pointing at them and shouting, "Dare to touch me?" Daniel stood up suddenly, pointing at the security guards' noses and yelling, "My brother is the chairman! I'm his real brother! You little dogs dare to lay a hand on me!" He cursed at me as well. "You bastard! You've already been kicked out of the Liu family. You have no right to command the employees of Liu Group." He was yelling and pushing the security guards, trying to come at me. Unbelievable. Just as I was about to teach him a lesson, Alex arrived. He asked coldly, "What's going on here?" Daniel immediately switched to a pitiful expression and said, "Brother, you came just in time. This bastard wants to have the security throw me out." Alex looked at him coldly and said, "This is a company. It's not your place to cause a scene. And I'm not your brother." Just then, a voice came from behind. "Alex, how can you speak to your brother like that?" It was Ken, who had also arrived. He added, "You two are brothers. In the future, your brother will help you with the company's affairs. Otherwise, without family support, you'll be bullied." Alex sneered, "Throw both of them out." Ken, realizing being soft wouldn't work, switched to a more forceful tone. "I'm the husband of Lisa, the heir of Liu Group and Alex's real father. This group is mine too." I smirked. "Throw them out. Don't let them dirty the company." The security guards, now fully aware of who controlled the company, dragged the two of them out. Ken was still yelling, "Robert, you wait! Tomorrow when the results come out, I'll make you kneel and beg me for a meal." I looked at his miserable state and said, "Don't worry. I've been waiting for the results." Finally, the day Ken had been eagerly awaiting arrived. I purposely woke up early and wore a full set of formal attire. After all, I was going to enjoy seeing Ken get slapped in the face. Apart from my mother-in-law, Lisa had invited the relatives to the forensic office to witness the process, probably hoping to get more people to laugh at me. How naive. She wanted everyone to laugh at me, but in the end, she was the one who would be laughed at. Before the results were announced, I asked Lisa with a smirk, "You chose this forensic office yourself. You won't have any objections to the results, will you?" Lisa proudly held her head high and swore, "Of course not. I never go back on my word." I almost laughed out loud. It seemed she wouldn't cry until she saw the coffin. Before the results arrived, Ken began his performance. He casually draped his arm around Lisa's shoulder and seriously said, "Lisa, once the results come out, we'll be a family again." As he said this, he shot a provocative look at me. I ignored him and turned to Alex. Sure enough, Alex looked just as indifferent, paying no attention to Ken's performance. Ken had hit a soft spot and became slightly awkward, but he quickly adjusted his expression and turned to Alex. "From now on, I'll be your father. If there's anything you want, feel free to tell me." With that, he pulled out a delicate little box and handed it to Alex. "This is a watch I bought for you as a token of our reunion. Do you like it?" Alex didn't even look at it and coldly replied, "I don't need it." Ken's smile froze. Lisa hurried to smooth things over. "Alex, your dad means well." Alex cut her off. "I don't need his goodwill. I only have one father, and that's Robert." A warm feeling surged in my chest. My son would always be on my side. Just then, the forensic staff returned with 3 copies of the test results. Ken, Lisa, and Daniel instantly perked up, their eyes fixed on the documents in the staff members' hands. Their eyes were like starving wolves eyeing their prey. They looked at me with smug expressions, as if they expected me to be completely humiliated and for them to enjoy wealth and glory. I could hardly suppress my laughter. The forensic staff cleared his throat and began reading the results. He said, "According to the DNA comparison results, Mr. Ken and Mr. Alex—" He deliberately paused, and Ken and Lisa leaned in, straining their necks as if they wanted to press their ears to the examiner's mouth. The surrounding relatives held their breath, their expressions varying, all waiting to watch me make a fool of myself. The forensic staff continued, "So, there is no biological relationship between them." The air seemed to freeze. Lisa's eyes widened, and she screamed hysterically, "Impossible! It must be a mistake!" Ken also roared, "How could this happen? How could there be no biological relationship?" His face turned pale, and the fear on his face was impossible to hide. Daniel grabbed the report, and upon seeing the results he slumped in the chair, muttering to himself, "Are you sure you didn't misread this? Let me see. How could this happen?" I asked the examiner to read my and Alex's DNA test results. He read aloud, "According to the DNA comparison results, Robert and Alex are biological father and son." A stunned murmur rippled through the crowd. Lisa seemed struck by lightning. She muttered in disbelief, "Impossible!" I looked at Alex, my mother-in-law, and the others, all looking confused, and I kindly explained, "I saw when you tampered with things back then, so I switched my sample back." As I watched her face grow increasingly ugly, I continued, "Oh, and by the way, I also switched your eggs with those of my ex-girlfriend, Amy." The entire room fell silent in shock. My mother-in-law suddenly raised her head, her murky eyes filled with astonishment. I looked at Lisa, speaking slowly. "Alex is not your child. Congratulations. You've been playing the role of my son's mother for more than 20 years. Lisa, upon hearing this, snatched the DNA report between her and Alex from the examiner's hands. After reading the results, her eyes immediately turned bloodshot, and she rushed toward me, aiming to slap me. She screamed, "Scoundrel!" However, I blocked her, pushing her forcefully to the ground. I looked down at her coldly. Ken, hearing the news, clung to Lisa like a drowning man grabbing at a life raft, whispering hoarsely, "Lisa, if Alex isn't yours, then he's not part of the Liu family. The heir must be Daniel." Ken's face was full of joy as he tightly grasped Lisa's wrist. Lisa suddenly understood, and a trace of malice flashed in her eyes. She staggered to her feet and walked toward my mother-in-law, who was still in shock, and said, "Mom, everyone, you've seen and heard it. Alex is not my child." She pointed at me, spitting and shouting hoarsely, "He's Robert's and his ex-girlfriend's bastard child. We can't let the Liu family's fortune fall into the hands of outsiders." Ken and Daniel immediately joined in, shouting, "Right, throw that bastard Alex out. The only heir to the Liu family is me, Daniel." My usually composed mother-in-law had finally snapped out of her shock. She completely ignored Lisa, her expression complex and unreadable to others. Her rare loss of composure, her voice trembling as she asked me, "Robert, is it true?" Seeing her like this made my heart twinge with a hint of bitterness. I replied, "It's true." Lisa, dissatisfied with her mother's reaction, shook her hand and said, "Mom, hurry up and announce that Daniel is the heir." My mother-in-law had already regained her composure, brushing her hand away, and calmly asked, "Do you know who Robert's ex-girlfriend is?" Lisa, now furious, stamped her feet and said, "What does that have to do with me? Anyway, Alex isn't our child." My mother-in-law replied, "Robert's ex-girlfriend is your sister, Anna. So Alex is still our child and the legitimate heir." My mother-in-law's words were like a bomb dropping into the crowd. She continued, "Everyone knows our family tradition. The legitimate eldest son inherits the business. Though we no longer prioritize sons over daughters, the heirs must be the children of the legitimate wife. Only when that line dies out does it fall to you, the illegitimate daughter." She glared at Lisa with a sharp look, warning her, "When Anna had her accident, your father had no choice but to take you back. Lisa, don't forget your place." At the mention of her true identity, Lisa's face turned pale. When her father was young, he had been tricked into fathering her with a female secretary. But no matter what, the Liu family could never accept an illegitimate child. Except for paying alimony, her father never looked at her. But fate took an unexpected turn when Anna had her accident and became a vegetable. With no choice, her father focused his attention on Lisa. He made her a condition. If she wanted to return to the Liu family, she had to have Robert enter the family because my father was her father's savior. Lisa had no feelings for me and was already in love with someone else, so she didn't want to marry me. But she understood the benefits of returning to the Liu family, so seeing that I seemed to admire her, she agreed to marry me. Ken had originally looked down on her poor background, but when she became the Liu family's daughter, he returned to her side. Lisa, on the other hand, was loyal to Ken. The reason we had gone for in vitro fertilization was that she wanted to stay faithful to him, refusing to be with me. The two of them had planned to take over the Liu family after her father passed away, but they hadn't expected her father to leave a backup plan. He divided his shares into 4 parts, creating a balance of power between us, and appointed me as the chairman to manage the company, preventing Lisa from entering the company. So Lisa had to rely on her shares to take part in the year-end distribution, and without real power, she was extremely resentful. Lisa, still struggling, retorted, "I don't believe Alex is Anna's child. Why should I trust Robert just because he says so?" I sneered at Lisa, then took another DNA test report from my bag. I said, "This is the DNA test between Alex and Anna." I opened the report and displayed it to everyone, saying, "You don't believe me? Anna is still in the nursing home, and Alex is right here. You can apply for a national-level forensic organization to take a sample and confirm it on the spot. Alex is the Liu family's child. I'm sure everyone will be convinced now." Ken and Daniel were dumbstruck. They never expected that Alex was actually Anna's child. The old lady still appeared calm and composed, but there was a glint of tears that flashed in her eyes. The relatives began to murmur, "So, Alex is Anna's child? Then Alex is the true heir. Looks like Lisa, the illegitimate daughter, won't be able to claim the Liu family fortune." Their eyes were filled with contempt as they looked at Lisa. Lisa seemed to have lost all her strength and collapsed onto the ground, her gaze hollow. She hadn't even had Alex acknowledge her as his mother, and now she had lost everything. Ken and Daniel were also like withered plants, completely deflated. The relatives understood now. Lisa was no match for me. Following Lisa would bring them no benefit. So, one by one, they stood up and left in a hurry. Lisa stared at me, lost in thought, and after some time, as if she had made a great decision, she walked over to my side with a flattering smile and said, "Robert, I know you love me. You just didn't like me partying in clubs or being too close to other men, right? I promise I won't contact Ken anymore. Can I come back to the Liu family?" I looked at her with pity and spoke slowly. "Lisa, you're wrong. I never loved you." Her face went pale instantly. She asked, "What did you say?" Her lips trembled as she asked, "Then why did you always stare at me like that? Why did you insist on marrying me?" I coldly explained, "Because you look like Anna, and I was just comforting myself by looking at you. Marrying you was about protecting Anna's legacy. You were the Liu family's daughter, and I had to marry you so I could enter the Liu family as your husband and gain access to the Liu group. It was all about keeping the power away from the other branches of the family. You must be wondering why Anna was my ex-girlfriend. Why would my father-in-law entrust the company to me, but not to his own daughter? Why has my mother-in-law treated me like her own son for so many years? When you were a child, you weren't in the Liu family, so you don't know. Even though I grew up in the countryside, my father-in-law, in gratitude for my dad's life-saving kindness, would bring me to stay at the Liu family villa every summer and winter vacation. Anna and I were childhood sweethearts, and we were already in love. My mother-in-law treated me like a son, and my father-in-law saw me as Anna's future husband. I received the same elite education as Anna." I laughed loudly, like I was looking at a fool. "It's laughable that you thought I was just a country boy, that I climbed into the Liu family because of gratitude, and that you actually thought I loved you." Lisa stood there as though struck by lightning, stunned. She had always believed that I loved her deeply, but now she realized she had just been a pathetic substitute. Everything she had was built on a lie. And now that the lie had been exposed, she had nothing left. Lisa completely collapsed. We had been playing a role, a play that lasted for 25 years. Now the play was over, and it was time for the curtain to fall. I asked the housekeeper to pack Lisa's things and kicked her out of the villa. I said, "Mom, I've been working on a project with a foreign medical institution. It's about stimulating the nerves of vegetative patients to promote awakening." The old lady suddenly looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You mean—" I nodded and said, "Anna has undergone several treatment sessions, and her brain waves are very active. The doctors say she will wake up soon." My mother-in-law was overjoyed, tears streaming down her face. She murmured, "Anna, my Anna." Meanwhile, Lisa, kicked out of the Liu family, wandered aimlessly on the street. The false prosperity of 25 years had collapsed in an instant. She returned to the apartment where she used to live with Ken, but he wasn't very welcoming. He mocked coldly, "You stupid woman, now we have nothing left." Lisa turned around in a flash, her eyes red. "Blame me? If you hadn't switched the sample back then, would this have happened?" Ken was stunned. He didn't expect Lisa to shift all the blame onto him. He retorted, "But you agreed to it back then, didn't you?" Lisa grabbed his arm, her voice rising in hysteria. "Shut up! What use is it to talk about that now? We have no money. Do you know how we're going to live with just 50,000? Ken shook her off and said, "Then what do you want to do? We can't just go work a regular job, can we?" Lisa let go of him. defeated. What now? She was so used to the lavish lifestyle, so accustomed to being adored. Now she had nothing left. Ken suddenly had an idea. He said, "$5 million! Alex still has the $5 million I gave him." Lisa's eyes lit up. She said, "Right, let's go find Alex." The two of them stumbled to Alex's apartment. After pressing the doorbell for a while, Alex lazily opened the door. Seeing them, there was no trace of surprise on his face. He asked, "What are you here for?" Ken pushed Alex aside and stormed into the room, shouting, "Give me back the money!" Alex sneered and replied, "Why should I?" Ken pointed at Alex, his whole body shaking with anger. Through gritted teeth, he said, "That's my money." Alex walked over to the sofa and casually sat down, crossing his legs. He said nonchalantly, "Mr. Ito, that $5 million was notarized as a gift to me, so I don't have to return it to you." Ken felt his vision darken. He became agitated. You. He pointed at Alex, but couldn't utter a complete sentence. A sharp pain hit his chest, and his vision went black. As he collapsed to the ground, Lisa froze in shock. She screamed, "Ken! Ken!" She rushed over, hugging him tightly, screaming in panic. Alex, witnessing this, dialed 911 with a calm expression, then, as though nothing had happened, continued reading his book. Lisa and Ken blamed each other after failing to get the money. When the $50,000 ran out, Lisa was broke. Ken refused to work and support Lisa. He told her that if she didn't find a job and continue depending on him, he would kick her out. Later, out of kindness, I called a headhunter to arrange a job for Lisa. A while later, I invited Alex to dinner with me. On the way to the restaurant, I hummed happily. Alex asked why I seemed so cheerful. I replied, "Because there's a good show to watch later." Sitting in the second-floor private room of a restaurant with an open kitchen, Alex looked through the transparent glass and saw Lisa, who had once never lifted a finger, now wearing a waitress uniform and serving dishes on the ground floor. He raised an eyebrow and looked at me, asking, "Is this it?" I smiled and said, "Of course not. Keep watching." After a while, we saw Ken walk in with a beautiful woman with a good figure. The two were laughing and chatting intimately. Lisa, of course, also saw them. Her expression froze instantly. She shouted, "Ken, what are you doing here?" Ken didn't even look at her and continued joking with the woman. Lisa's voice grew louder, and she shouted, "Ken, I'm talking to you!" Only then did Ken look up in irritation, glance at her and say, "What's wrong? We're eating. Are you blind?" Lisa pointed at the woman and said, "You and her." Ken suddenly laughed, a shameless grin on his face. He said, "What's wrong with me and Susan? Does it bother you?" Lisa's face turned bright red. Fuming with indignation, she asked, "What is your relationship with her?" Ken replied, "She's my girlfriend. What, is that a problem?" Lisa staggered backward, her mind in a daze. "A girlfriend? You actually—" Ken looked at her provocatively, asking, "What? You think I can't have a girlfriend? I'll tell you, Lisa, I've been with Susan for over 20 years. All the money I stole from you back then went to support her." He paused for a moment before adding, "And you didn't know, did you?" Susan, standing beside her, sneered and said, "Sis, you're just a side chick." Lisa felt her world shatter completely. The man she loved had betrayed her. Her son wasn't even hers. 25 years of devotion had turned into nothing but a cruel joke. In a blind rage, she ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife and charged back, hurling herself at Ken and stabbing him like a madwoman, screaming hysterically, "You scumbag, you ruined me, you ruined everything!" Ken screamed as blood soaked his clothes. Alex watched in horror as the bloodbath unfolded before him, while I calmly sipped my tea. The police arrived quickly and took Lisa away. Alex, still stunned, asked me, "Dad, is this the show you wanted me to see?" I set my teacup down and gently explained to him, Alex, today I'm teaching you. Never show mercy to your enemies. Alex, puzzled, asked, Lisa and the others tried to seize the inheritance. Kicking her out was enough. Why go so far? I replied, because what happened to your mother wasn't an accident. Lisa tricked her into going to the construction site, and the truck that caused the accident was tampered with by Ken. I tried to stay calm, but my voice still carried a trace of hatred. I still couldn't forget the feeling when I saw Anna covered in blood. For 25 years, I had wished nothing more than to kill Lisa and Ken, but I held back because I wanted them to destroy each other. Lisa's job was arranged by me, making it easier for her to get a weapon. Ken had been led here by me. The woman he was with was a public relations worker, and I had arranged for her to receive 2 restaurant vouchers, placing them right in front of Lisa. There was no way she could miss them. Ken was taken to the hospital, but ultimately died from his injuries. Later, I heard from Alex that without Ken's money, Daniel's life had become unbearable, and he ended up following his biological mother into becoming an escort. When his classmates went out to have fun, one even recognized him. What a mockery. Days passed and life seemed to return to normal. But then, a phone call from the hospital sent ripples through the calm. The doctor said Anna had woken up. I could hardly believe my ears. 25 years, and she finally woke up. I immediately took Alex and my mother-in-law to the hospital. In the hospital room, Anna lay quietly on the bed, pale but with a clear gaze. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. She asked, "Robert, why do you look so old?" Tears welled up in my eyes, and my throat tightened. "We've waited so long for you," I choked out. I motioned to my mother-in-law and Alex, who were waiting outside the door. Anna's gaze shifted to Alex, and she asked, "Who is this?" I honestly explained that he was our child from IVF. She looked stunned for a moment, then accepted it well, her eyes softening with maternal love as she looked at Alex. She asked, "What's his name?" I replied, "His name is Alex." Anna smiled gently and whispered, "Alex, he's very handsome."